So I've been shopping luxury goods for many years now, so I'd like to consider myself a pretty savvy shopper first and foremost, but also someone with the fortune to have amassed quite a collection of luxury bags and shoes and ready-to-wear and jewellery. And so when it comes to luxury shopping, I'm pretty methodical. I have a set process, a set of criteria that the item needs to fulfill, the brand that I buy from needs to fulfill, and obviously the store that's selling the item that I want needs to also fulfill. And it's worked for me well thus far. But one thing I was not prepared for is when I recently made a trip, my first ever trip to the wonderful country, Japan. It's been on the top of my bucket list for quite some time. I can't believe it's taken me this long to go. I went there not really thinking too much around luxury shopping there. I know people have mentioned in the past Japan's a great place to do that, but I haven't really looked into it that much. And honestly, I thought if I was gonna buy a bag or a pair of shoes or something that's a little bit of a kind of memorabilia of that trip, it will probably be at an airport. Or I thought it'd be a case of going to a Chanel in a different country and buying it there tax-free, which I've done in the past. However, despite these thoughts in mind, I actually ended up buying an item not only from Japan in one of their home stores, but actually an item that is technically, I suppose for all intents and purposes, pre-loved. So little did I know, I was gonna come back from my trip to Japan with this baby here. It does not fulfill, I suppose, at least on the outset anyway, the usual criteria that I would buy a bag. You know, I usually buy it store fresh. I certainly don't buy it on any kind of pre-loved website or store. And yet here I am holding a bag that has, one, been owned by someone before, and number two, of course, that it came from a pre-loved luxury store. I'm sure a few of you out there will be thinking, Mel, you're a hypocrite, or why have you changed your mind? I mean, this is basically a brand new bag to me, and actually it's pristine. It had all of its care cards and dust bag and everything like that, the full set. However, the big differentiator, of course, was the fact that it was priced incredibly well. I got this for about just around £3,000, a little bit over perhaps in British pounds. And I could not believe that this beauty was still sat in that store when I bought it, because I thought, this has got to be one of the world's best kept secret. How is no one shouting about the fact that I can get a Chanel bag for about £3,000? And actually, after I bought the bag, and I even just looked around other stores as well, I reflected on all the bags that I saw and also how I was treated as well. While in the past I may have had certain opinions on vintage or pre-loved shopping, Japan is an exception in itself because it is a completely different ball game when it comes to buying and selling luxury goods. And so today I wanted to sit down and share with you the 8 observations and kind of lessons that I've learned in luxury shopping in Japan, and how it has completely changed the way that I think and will buy luxury fashion from now on. So let's start point number 1 with an immediate observation I had upon entering my first few stores, and it has honestly just gone on and continued to exceed my expectation in this regard, and that is the pre-loved stores look like department stores. The stores are immaculate. They have the most elegant fixtures and fittings. You would not even know unless someone told you that these stores were selling you pre-loved luxury. I had to do a double take to my boyfriend many times and say, are these items used? Down almost any other street, at least in Tokyo and also Osaka in the main shopping streets, there were these luxury stores almost everywhere, and they are all just as beautiful as the next. There's plenty of choice there. Some of these stores also have really cult-like followings, and also they market them so well. It's almost like they're doing drops, like they're releasing a new fashion line. Even if you're not going to buy anything and you're in Japan, I'd highly recommend you go in and visit, because I feel like the experience and the atmosphere is just second to none. I don't feel like I've been to such beautiful shops, especially ones that sold pre-loved before in my life. And so that completely changed the game and how I view pre-loved. It's not just about old items in tired looking settings, they are actually elevated in luxurious settings. And this leads nicely now into my second point, and that's because you see these stores everywhere. It feels like there is an almost oversaturation of brands that you would actually consider to be super exclusive, such as your Hermes, Birkins and Kellys, or your Rolexes and Cartiers. They are actually almost overabundant. There is an oversaturation of these items. When you walk into each of these stores, you are guaranteed to see a row of Birkins, a row of Kellys, etc. And actually, when I walk further, and if they had fine jewelry, there would be tons of Van Cleef bracelets, necklaces, earrings. In the UK, in contrast, I have been on, for example, the Rolex waiting list, waiting still to this day to get the Rolex watch that obviously I was lucky to buy at an airport, but there I was in front of me and I was at liberties to try them on and buy them if I wanted to. But it almost seemed a little bit too easy to get them, and that's when I kind of reflected in terms of this particular point anyway, around how relative it is, or how marketing really makes it seem like one item is so sought after and limited, and the kind of gymnastics they need to do to make it more exclusive. And then you come to a different side of the world, literally the other side of the world in Japan, and they are everywhere. And there is just no air of mystique there. It's just all very accessible. You kind of wake up and you realize, what is all the fuss about actually? Now on to point number 3, and this is that a lot of the items that I saw weren't just vintage items, but there was a lot of items that were in pretty much brand new condition. Looking on the UK Preloved sites, they have a lot of items that have obviously been used to obviously varying degrees, but they've obviously had previous owners. Whereas in the stores that I was looking at, there was quite a variation of items that were definitely vintage and heavily used, but then you actually had a sliding scale up until items that are basically brand new. Case in point, my newest handbag, this Chanel shopping tote, which essentially, aside from the fact that I just peeled off the sticker just now, is brand new. It's a very interesting culture. I think they have a lot of people go and get extra cash there selling on their items because they always want the next new thing. It's kind of like, I guess, upgrading your iPhone or something every 18 months. They do that with their luxury goods. Because of that fast turnover, I suppose that creates that selection of almost new items that enter these stores, and you know, it's a quick way to get instant cash because these stores have little storefronts everywhere actually, where they'll be basically pawn shops to offer you instant money. So it's very easy for people to sell their barely used items so that they can get money for the next one. I just had it in my head that vintage or pre-loved shopping would be for items that were really and authentically used and used to death, like they are usually in the UK. But the Japanese keep their stuff in very pristine condition, I suppose. And this leads me on nicely into the next point, number 4, and that's the items that I saw were pristine. Honestly, if you didn't tell me that these were vintage items, I would have assumed they were just store fresh, because they just keep their stuff immaculate. I don't know what it is around the Japanese culture. I mean, actually I can tell because everything is immaculate in Japan. I had no idea with luxury that they would baby their items so much to the point where they don't even look used. The Japanese luxury goods grading system is, I would say, quite meticulous, or even you could say harsh, because any little nook and scratch that you see will degrade the item to that, you know, below on their sliding scale. And so for this bag, for example, this was a grade S, which is equating to, I guess, superb or mint condition quality. You can get some really good deals over there for items which they class in Japan as used or like an B grade item, but in the UK that would be like almost an A grade item. So I suppose it is no shock then why people go on about luxury shopping in Japan, because it's basically like getting brand new items. I also forgot to mention that Japan is also very hot on counterfeits, and they have, I think, pretty much like a no tolerance policy. And all the stores that I've been to are incredibly reputable. They obviously have that store presence, which obviously helps a little bit. It's not like buying on an eBay or something. And they'll be very transparent on the authenticity procedures that they have for items, and you can obviously go and authenticate them yourself. And usually have their authenticity, or potentially even their full set of dust bag and books and everything. You can be quite safe and confident that your money is in good hands. Now on to point number 5, and this is that not all items are equal in terms of their availability or in terms of their price. As examples, Louis Vuittons I found super saturated, I suppose, in every single store. The Keepers and the Speedies in particular, they had a lot of vintage versions of that. You also had a lot of vintage backpacks, bowling bags, hat bags. There were so many of those, to the point where actually they didn't seem very exclusive to have Louis Vuitton, because back in the UK it seems very, very kind of much at arm's reach. In Japan, however, they are absolutely everywhere, and they're also priced accordingly because of how abundant they are, because they're usually around £500 or £600 as a standard for a good quality bag. Some places I've known and some people I've known to get Louis Vuitton bags even cheaper for the £300 marks. If you then go on the other side of the sliding scale, your Hermes, Birkins and Kellys, they know that Hermes, Birkins and Kellys are at the top of the totem pole for luxury handbags, and they also know that there is a price harmonization happening around the world when it comes to price increases. So a lot of the Hermes bags, yes, they were cheaper than if you were to buy it on a resale website or store in the UK, but they weren't that much cheaper than I imagined. I mean, a lot of the bags there, depending obviously again on the condition, if you don't mind a little bit of use, you will probably find a good deal. There were other bags that were very, I suppose, limited edition, so it makes sense that they're priced in the upwards of the tens of thousands. But when you compare it to the UK size, you might actually get lucky there too, buying an item in a similar condition, because they know obviously that Hermes is so sought after worldwide. So you do notice a little bit of that peak as well when it comes to Japan, despite the fact that it's, you know, Birkins and Kellys are everywhere. It's still priced a little bit more expensively because I suppose of the exclusivity. Now on to number 6, and we're going to start talking price. And this is that the price that you see on the little tag is not always the price that you pay. As a foreigner, you'll know, and hopefully if you didn't know, this will be very helpful for you, that as long as you bring your passport, the price that you see will be 10% cheaper for the price that you'll actually need to pay. But not only that is the fact that you can actually negotiate in the stores for the price that you'll pay, which I didn't know was a thing, especially when you consider that these stores look like proper boutiques. Can you imagine haggling for a Birkin or Kelly in the UK? I mean, that's just not something that you'd be able to do. So the fact that you can do that on an authentic item with its full set or whatever in Japan is astounding. And I only found this out post buying my Chanel bag, so I'm a little bit miffed that I could have got this potentially cheaper. One of the sales associates when I was looking at bags mentioned to me if I was interested in something, she could always do me a discount. So that is something I found very unique about Japan and very appealing in the luxury goods proposition there, because you cannot do that anywhere in Europe or the West in general. Even if they say no to a negotiation on price, you can just hop over to the next one, and then the next, and then the next. Now on to point number 7, and this is, I guess, a little bit more existential but super important, and that is, I feel the power dynamic between store and customer has completely changed, a complete 180 compared to how it is in the West. I've had obviously my fair share of good experiences and essays that I like and trust, versus also experiences on the other side of the spectrum where I've had snooty people in the Chanels or in the Hermes boutiques that don't have a second of their time for me. You very much feel like you are at the whims of the sales associate or of the brand to even be able to offer you the opportunity to buy the item. And you really do feel that nowadays, with increasing restrictions on availability, you know, wait lists, wish lists, all that kind of thing. And then you obviously have the price increases that are trying to really outprice the previous audiences. They're obviously trying to appeal to an ever more exclusive elite class. And you feel like if you want to try and get into that club, get into that class, that you've got to play all these games and buy all these other things that you don't like and don't need before you can get the thing that you do want. Conversely, however, when I went to these boutiques in Japan, and I've been to, I want to say, maybe like 15 or 20 in the whole duration of the trip that I was there, I had consistently, and I think it's just a cultural thing anyway in Japan, impeccable experience. I had very friendly sales associates there. A lot of them, you know, they were very helpful or just left me to my own devices. Hell, I was even managing to get all of these clips for you to put together in a vlog, whereas in the UK I would get security or sales associates snapping at me. There they don't mind at all that you want to browse through their items. They really like the fact that you're interested in the goods. They want to help you. And they also, conversely, you know, if you just want to browse and you need the space, they'll do that too. The power feels like it's back into the customer, and that's where it belongs really, because you're the one that is going to be forking over significant amounts of cash. It just made me really wake up and realize, hang about, why am I putting so much money into these brands that don't really care about me at all? I mean, I always knew this really in the back of my mind, but even if you don't buy something, they still treat you with respect. It wasn't the company or the brand holding something over me as a customer. It almost felt the other way of what they could do for me so that they would be so fortunate to get my custom. And it was a nice change in the power dynamic, not gonna lie. And that's why I feel like buying in Japan is just a whole nother level, because you really feel valued and you feel like your money goes really, really far there. And now on to the last point, and this one I think is a nice way to end this, and a good thinking and reflecting point for you all, is that luxury really is in the eye of the beholder. I feel like Japan has totally flipped the way that I think about luxury. I've been to some of the most beautiful boutiques that I've ever seen in my life, and they sold pre-loved items. The experience is much better, the selection is also very vast, the people are just friendlier, and it's just a nicer atmosphere to shop in, way less daunting, but you still feel valued. A lot of the boutiques in the UK, the West, could learn a thing or two from them, especially when it comes to customer service. It totally dashed the preconceptions that I had about this particular industry. In any case, having said all of that, I think it's safe to say that Japan has completely changed the game when it comes to luxury shopping. It might be pricey to get yourself out there, but to me it is so worth it if you haven't experienced it out there in Japan, and you know, you're interested also of course in the culture, the history, the food, all of that, then I would highly recommend a visit. I'm certainly going to be planning my next visit very soon. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below on if you've ever been to Japan or would consider buying luxury there. But anyways, thank you as always for watching, and I will catch you in my next one.